Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 959th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Sara Reisman and Christina Yang. We're thrilled to welcome poet Sallie Fullerton here to close today's program. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Sara Reisman is a curator, writer, and educator with over 20 years of experience in the field. She's currently the Chief Curator at the National Academy of Design in New York City. Previous roles include Executive and Artistic Director for the Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation and Director of New York City's Percent for Art program. She's curated exhibitions for Hugh, Dublin City Gallery, the Queen's Museum, the Philadelphia ICA, and LaMaMa Galleria, among many other venues. And our host today, Christina Yang, is an independent curator, writer, and scholar and educator based in New York. She specializes in experimental genres, politics of the image, social practice, and feminist care. She's a PhD candidate in performance studies at NYU. Her dissertation, Performance and the Gaze, Spectatorship in the Kitchen Archive from 1974 to 1984, is forthcoming. In New York, she has worked as a curator at the Kitchen and the Guggenheim, as well as in Williamstown and Berkeley. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Christina.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Happy Friday. It's great to be here for the New Social Environment number 959. Thank you, Chloe, for that lovely welcome and introduction. I'm super excited to really be providing a couple of little platforms to, hear from the incredible Sara Reisman and her capacious and inclusive and really quietly powerful exhibition, Drawing as Practice, that has been on view at the National Academy of Design since September. It closes soon, so try to go see it if you haven't already, or go back and really delight in the incredible themes and the delicate handwork and the really kind of provocative theses that come out of this exhibition. Some of you might know this institution well, or some may not. So I'm going to err on the side of slightly asking Sara for a slightly broader introduction to the Academy's history, its membership, and its collection. And I think especially so since this exhibition inaugurates its move from the Upper East Side of New York City to the West Chelsea Gallery neighborhood. And so, we'll probably conclude with some thoughts from Sara as to the institution's both, moment of change, but also a place of continuity, and really think about that as at such a significant time. So I think we're going to just jump right into it and start looking at some views and works from the exhibition. But by way of introduction to what I think Sara is going to be further illuminating in the next hour, I just want to start by actually quoting her own voice in the exhibition essay, Drawing a Line. She states that an exhibition about drawing in 2023 is as much about the possibilities of drawing as about techniques, methods, material, scale, surface, and concept. Clearly, drawing has evolved in the 200 years since the National Academy was founded, but as technology continues to advance, the medium's potentials continue to proliferate, making it forever impossible to pin down its limits. So I think with that, Sara, Chloe, can we maybe go to the second slide, I guess? Sara, maybe you could tell us a little bit just about the founding of the National Academy of Design, which I actually understand was called the New York Drawing Association when it was first founded, and really maybe about something about its pedagogical model, how it developed a community within New York that was very, very unique, and then really, how the collection developed, because it's such a unique kind of history and mission. I think it really is helpful to sort of frame that for our viewers.
Sure. So to start, thank you for this kind of setup, Christina. So when the National Academy was founded in 1825, there were no art schools or museums as we know them today. So it was founded by a group of artists and architects who had seen these kind of honorary societies in Europe, and modeled the Academy after those organizations. And drawing was something that was at the kind of core of collective practice within the Academy, drawing instruction, drawing exhibitions. So really the Academy was founded as a place for both instruction and exhibition opportunities. What I would say is there's like a lot of the history. Where we are now in Chelsea is our 14th location since the Academy's founding. For a lot of people who I still continue to meet, they say, oh, aren't you on the Upper East Side? So we were previously on 89th and 5th Avenue. And there was a decision that sort of was finalized in 2019 when the Academy's membership, the academicians who were elected into the Academy and board members decided to sell the buildings on the Upper East Side. There was a school, an administrative office, and a townhouse that functioned as a museum. What appeals to me in joining the Academy in 2021, what appealed to me and continues to appeal to me is the idea that we have this history of being both an art school and also an academy. We have a museum, an exhibition space, and the fact that it's where art and architecture come together. And I think it just, to me, at the moment of 2021, that spring, I was thinking, this has a history as a museum, but we don't have to be a museum. And so for the first 2 years of my time with the Academy, we were based at the National Arts Club. I'm answering this in my own voice. There's more to say about the sort of history of the Academy. And we moved to Chelsea this summer, and then had our first first show. This is the first show, Drawing as Practice. And what we wanted to do with this show, what I wanted to do was to highlight moments in the Academy's history. And we'll see as we go through these images, the sort of different, I wouldn't necessarily say they're all movements, but they're groupings that have been drawn from the collection. And a note about the collection is that one of the traditions of the Academy has been that every academician that's elected into the Academy has the opportunity to give what we call a diploma work. So an artwork that's representative of their practice. And so within the exhibition, about 2/3 of the works are by academicians. A third of the works are from our collection. And then a little less than a third are as yet unaffiliated academicians. If we could go back one slide, I just want to point to these, actually one more. The first grouping in the exhibition are examples of instructional drawings from drawing sessions at the Academy. And I felt like it was important to root our new space in that history to help people understand where we're coming from, even though it's the very beginning. And we can go to 2 slides forward towards Richard Haas. I mean, this is a kind of outlier in that first grouping because Richard Haas is an active academician. This work seemed interesting because it was made, it's from 1974, but it references this building, Thomas Cole's house that was built I think it was built starting in 1870. And so the works on that wall from the early years of the Academy, all of them are from around that time, from like 1827 to like 1870 something. So it was to kind of connect also this image of a kind of iconic image of architecture in the Hudson Valley. Christina, do you have I feel like I skipped over a lot of history.
No. This was actually perfect.
Good. Okay.
The one thing I might ask, which actually kind of follows, I think, logically, the exhibition. Let's see. Chloe, can we just see what the next slide? I think it's the cast, right? Yeah, great. So this image of this plaster cast connects also then to the second image of the drawing, the drawing session itself. And I love, Sarah, how you kind of like bracket the beginning of National Academy of Design at the study or the practice of architects, and then the sort of like place of the figure, as you stated, sort of going back to like the Beaux-Arts tradition of drawing from the body, life drawing, and really thinking of the human body as a kind of as a kind of form for so much, whether it's nation building, whether it's private narrative, or other forms of looking. So but it's interesting to see, sculptural works in a drawing show. And
Right.
so, I guess what I'm interested in maybe is in when the New York Drawing Association became the National Academy of Design, and how you think of like the discipline of drawing, or even the practice of drawing, or even drawing as a medium, sort of tying together these different, the practices of art and architecture, and
Yeah.
and then how design, I guess I'm thinking about design, drawing, art, and architecture,
Okay.
sort of like how that, as your
Yeah.
thesis kind of, really, it's actually there at the beginning of the, of this institution.
Right. Well, so one thing that it might not be obvious to many listening in today is that when the National Academy of Design was founded, the arts of design included drawing, painting, sculpture, engraving, and architecture. So it really referred to the fine arts as we know them now, or the visual arts and architecture. And so the kind of the fact that we keep design in our name is something that, I think I think the academicians want to keep that in the name. And I think it's an interesting point of reference looking back. The casts were a decision to include casts in the show came out of a visit to our collection, which is stored and maintained in Delaware. And so back in April, Natalia Vera Salgado and I were there with the director of our collections, Diana Thompson, and our registrar, Amanda Shields. And we were looking at roughly 90 works that we'd identified, drawings in the collection that we wanted to look at in person. And as we looked at them in person, we were able to get a sense of like, okay, these are the works we want to include, and really focused on themes that were apparent in the collection. So this section that we're looking at, it's part of a section called Structures in Architecture. The first section that we looked at with the figures is, figure, portraiture, body. And there are other sections like plans and proposals, thinking about like public art and sketches for architecture that may not be realized, right? Also looking at experimental drawing forms like non-traditional drawing, instructional drawing, and that's something that we'll come to later, like what that means in a contemporary sense versus the sort of academic drawings in a classroom setting, or academic drawings as a form of training, right? So we really kind of dug into these different themes that we could see, and just based on what was in the collection, and then figured we would build out the show from there, adding works and artists and architects from outside that could speak to these themes and activate it and bring attention to what's in the collection, who the academicians are, but also in a way that looks outward at the same time. The cast, the one that's actually in that second image, it's from a brochure. I think it was done in like the drawing is from 1923, I believe, and it's Charles Chapman. So drawing made for a booklet cover, and this was at a location, I think, on 109th Street. So you see, this is a different cast than the one we were looking at, but it's an écorché model, which is an anatomical model that is écorché in French means splayed. And to cut away. So it's you see all the kind of anatomical details in the figure. So this is the cover, and I like to joke, although I don't know if it's a good joke or not, that this cover, you see there's at least one woman in the classroom drawing. And so this is like the diversity moment of the Academy. There are women involved now. So the later model that we were just looking at is the athlete. And so these aren't the original casts from the very beginning, but they're based on casts that academicians pooled funds in order to ship them from Europe. So that's something that happened in the 19th century. And then a lot of the casts were actually on long-term loan to an art school in Connecticut. So we got a few of them back for the show. But when we were looking at artwork in our collection storage, I saw the écorché model and I thought, this is in one of the works. Let's connect like drawing to three-dimensional objects, or, physicality of 3 dimensions. So that was really the decision.
I actually love seeing the cast because you get both the sense of what it was like to be, like with this instructional, this object of instruction, but also, it just, I don't know, it lets your eye wander in a different way.
Yep.
You can almost imagine as if you were to draw from it. It's like you want to draw it, from all different angles. And so it's,
I love hearing that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's really helpful in that moment when you know, the Academy or this drawing association was kind of like still working in this, you know, kind of pedagogical way. So we might as well just go to the next slide. Yes, why don't we take a little time and look at this architecture and like museum drawing, you know, public facade section. I mean, we have a couple of more closer views, but again, you know, really, I mean, again, thinking of the membership is actually so interesting and how important drawing is to the practice of eventually, you know, going to a three-dimensional building materials and then, you know, like environmental, you know, scale. So I think that is such a, I don't know, through line importance, you know, contribution that the National Academy of Design makes, and that its members, that membership is based on, is really comes through in your selection. But something else also comes through is actually, you know, something about like you know, buildings are like finished objects. They, you know, they function and they, you know, they have a kind of purity and a substance to them. But that I will say that even if we go back, Chloe, to the you know, view of the wall, it's like there's really, I mean, you really see the process here of how an architect thinks, you know, and the kind of like imagination that goes into that practice as well. So if you would like to really talk about your thinking about this section and how,
I think if we go to the next slide, that has 4 works from the collection.
Nice.
Upper left-hand corner is, I think that's the Pacific Design Center facade by Cesar Pelli. I hope I'm right about that. On the right is Todd Williams. It's the entryway to the Barnes Foundation. The lower left is a facade study by Billy Chen of the Barnes Foundation as well. So those are 2, they work together on that project. And then the lower right is Charles Gwathmey. It's a expansion, like a proposal for an expansion of the Guggenheim. And these are all from the collection. So these are diploma works from those architects. And then if we go back to the previous slide, just to point out, you see the green dresser piece by Nora Maite Nieves. What would be to the left of that is that grouping of 4 that we just looked at. And I can name who's here. It's like the sort of frame piece is by Mel Chin. Below that are 2 works by Judy Pfaff. There are 4 drawings by Raphael Vignoli. Below that, a proposal for public art by Mary Mattingly. All the way to the right, lower image is James Prentice. It's a kind of self-portrait in front of the MoMA, and above that, can I actually see that? Oh, that's Frank Gehry. So thank you for enlarging that, zooming in. So what we wanted to kind of look at was that on the one hand, there's like the kind of architectural drawing that could be, we have many of those that we can show, but how could we show architecture in different forms, and how drawing is a way to communicate architecture and structures. And so I'll point to Nora Maite Nieves's piece, El Dresser, which is the green, kind of looks like a painting, but actually it's a frottage piece. And she has another piece in the show that's a door. So it's a whole frottage of a door from an apartment where she lived. And on the sides of this, what you can't see is it's like encrusted with tile, like mosaic and wood paneling, you know, set in kind of cast concrete. And so there's or grout maybe. So there's this kind of notion of like the structures of everyday life, like in the domestic space, but then also large scale buildings, and the sort of process of sketching that out, you know, really before anything's finished, because I think the unfinished is I mean, there's a reflection of unprocessed that we can see, but it's also about the value of capturing, like letting that residue stay in place so we can refer back to it, right? That it's not about, I know sometimes when I write, I'll like think, oh, I should delete everything that I didn't include. My problem is I don't look back that much at those materials, but I think for an artist or architect, there's probably a real impulse to keep that record, that archive. So it's about archiving process in part. Long-winded answer.
No, beautiful. I mean, really kind of, I think your thoughtful approach to and you know, positioning, framing, you know, how drawing, you know, operates within architectural practice and their training as well.
And I do want to point out that I think, like with Judy Pfaff's work, which are harder to see, these are like stage designs for Regina, a play that she was involved in the stage set for that at Bard. You know, the drawing by James Prentice is like that's an artist making a work, that references the Museum of Modern Art. So the point is that like drawings about architecture or of architecture, not always by architects. And I think vice versa, that can be, architects make artwork as well.
No, yeah, I think that's what I was sort of like sensing from being in front of the wall, was really that these are individuals who have a profession, but they also, their practice is as multidisciplinary as any other, artist might be working, as you say, in theater and music, and, to have a chance to think about a house for those other artistic forms, which is, I think, your selection has been really was really intentional in these identifying these works. I want to let the audience know that we're going to actually come back to talk about Mel Chin a little later, because Sarah does a really beautiful thing where she has artists' work talking across different of her themes. And I thought it was easier to actually put some of these artists together. But yeah, why don't we just look at this one really quickly, which is kind of a continuation of that
wall,
like center wall, and just adding this one other.
The last work is by Hugo Bastidas, and I mean, he does these massive drawings. I mean, this is relatively small for his work, but drawings of landscapes and architectural structures. And I like that this is a kind of combination of both. I mean, it just felt like it needed a prominent location in the show. And one thing that came up was initially we thought in all of the themes that we'd come up with looking at the collection, that landscape and nature would be one of the themes. But in the end, there weren't so many drawings that really addressed that. So we ended up taking that out of the basket of themes and sections.
Yeah. I like the little references though. And we're going to pick up on sort of like nature, animal, Anthropocene, which I thought came through in such kind of like unexpected, but really like these little like poignant moments. Great. So just for the sake of the audience, this wall here actually is an extension of the back wall, that first wall that we saw on the very first slide, the entry wall where Sarah, has the intro panel. So you can move within the space of the architectural drawings, and then you end up coming out around to the back at that same space, or you could just keep going along the wall past the cast of the figure, and then you're in this really provocative space of the body and of loosely the animal. And so Sarah, and we're going to look a little closely actually at the Dottie Addy work and the Emily Gossio, but actually let's go back, Chloe, to the first longer view. I'm actually noticing that the audience is asking questions actually about women's inclusion in the Academy, and I think it's again, you look at any pedagogical model of like Western art, and like the female body is very present, and so I think we're kind of at one of the moments where Sarah has done this wonderful thing where she has both like gesture towards that history of the gaze and the nude, but actually allowed a woman artist to actually kind of complicate that, and a contemporary artist.
Right.
And but I think as you go through the exhibition, you will actually see a pretty substantial number of women artists. And so, I think again that I feel like that is both possible, in the history, in the history of the Academy, but also it's really kind of, I think, Sarah's contribution to sort of again having an inclusive view of the practice of drawing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm going to answer this in some broad strokes, that when Natalia, who I co-curated the show with, when Natalia Veras Delgado and I were looking at what was in the collection, what we felt like would, make an impact in the exhibition from the collection, there was an issue of diversity, especially with historic works. So there was an intentional effort to expand the diversity of what could be included in whose work could be included in the show. And this left-hand image is the drawing of a dog, is by Michael Waugh. And that's a piece that I'm just going to talk a little bit about the works on this wall. Part of what I liked about Michael's work next to Dottie Addy's work, which is a work called In Old Age he painted, that there are two works that look very conventional, but when you get closer to them, it kind of falls apart. And so with Michael's work, he's an artist who primarily these days works with micrographic process. So he takes like a historical document or a political document and transcribes it in handwritten writing. So I know that sounds redundant, but he hand writes the text into the form of the artwork he's making. So this dog is based on, I think, an engraving from 1852 by a German artist named Adam Johann Klein. And Michael basically made the image based on this sort of assessment that Obama initiated in 2013 about voter mistrust of the electoral system. So the short title is Best Practices. And so it's this kind of, so if you look at it, you can get like little snippets of text if you're really close, but from a certain distance, it looks like an engraving. Can I make a point about genitalia?
I don't know if we're gonna get closed off by but
no. So what's interesting is in talking about like the figure, when we see the casts, there are different ways that genitalia is conveyed in the casts. And so in the two male casts that are what we saw in earlier images, the Écorché model, it's very explicit in the 3 dimensions, but in the drawing by Chapman, there's like it's kind of blurred out. Like so there are these interesting ways that like genitalia and gender get kind of referenced or muted in certain works. So Michael made a comment when we were looking at this work. He's like, you might notice that I adjusted the scythe. There's like a scythe next to the dog. It's like the handle is moved so that the genitalia is accentuated. So that was like Michael's little intervention and otherwise faithfully reproducing this 19th century engraving. With Dottie Addy's work, in old age, he painted, I think what I liked about this work in particular, aside from it being a totally beautifully rendered drawing, is that I think it really plays with the gaze because the seated figure is looking away. And then do we have a close-up view of the work?
Yeah, let's go to the next slide if we can, Kelly. Be nice. Yeah.
There's this text at the bottom that says, in old age, he painted, I think it's again and again without success. And you can see, if we zoom in, there's like a little patch next to the figure's arm that is...
She go to the Dottie Addy, yeah, you can see by her elbow, the swath.
Yeah, it's like you kind of see it's like I think of it as the subject looking back or the figure looking back, the bather, because it's referencing Ingres. And that was interesting to note that Dottie Addy has said, Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres has been my role model since I was 11, and he continues to be one today. So, but I also like to kind of imagine that in this scene, the bather is like sitting up and kind of looking away. There's something kind of disruptive about her looking back and that text at the bottom in the lower right-hand corner. With Emily Louise Gassio, and I want to connect it to the Alex Katz piece next to it. So Emily Louise Gassio's work is often about her dog, London, her guide dog. And so they're holding hands, and what is maybe hard to see, and it took me some time to actually process this once the work was in the space, is that, and I've seen the work and I knew this, maybe I just forgot because we were dealing with it, receiving over 100 works and setting them out, is the idea that there's Emily and London, their bodies are kind of hybridized.
Matching. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Or they're not matching exactly. Emily has a tail, London doesn't, and Emily has a dog, dog's nipples, London does not. So it's sort of like the female, the human body and the dog body are kind of mixed up. And I think Emily's described this relationship with her guide dog as one of interdependency, and the fact that like the way that their bodies sort of are interacting at every turn when she's being guided. She has a show that's opening this week, or just opened, at the Queen's Museum, and there's sculptures that relate to this kind of form, which is really exciting. But I liked connecting it to Alex Katz's work, Anastasia, which is the circa 1984. It's a sketch for a print, and the idea that this work is almost an after image was kind of interesting to think about in relation to Emily's practice. So this is one of those pairings that just sort of emerged as we were laying out the show. And I have to, just as a disclaimer, I've never curated a show with so many works and with that is so salon, an academic hang, if you will, salon style. Yeah, so
I think it works really beautifully. Actually, I want to ask one question. Can you go back to the view? Yeah, the Dottie Addie and the Gusio and the cats. Sarah, do you want to talk about the little notebook
sure,
that the public can actually leaf through? And then I do have one more comment and a question.
Yeah, so they're in the front gallery there, which I don't think we're going to see this. There's some vitrines that actually have some academic architectural drawings by James Timberlake and Stephen Curran, who were both in Rome approximately like a year or two apart in the early 80s. And they made drawings of the same site, the Palazzo Petruzzi. I mentioned that because in terms of vitrines, there are a few other places where there are vitrines, and we had thought we would show some sketchbooks from the 19th century kind of part of the collection, which we have done. But I mentioned that to Emily, and she just said, I mean, I have notebooks if you want to, I'd be happy to lay that out. And I think what is interesting is you really get a sense of her thought process. Yeah, and the kind of, I think the notebooks are important because what it brings us to is this idea of what is a practice. And I think like Joanne Greenbaum we installed a collection of her daily drawings that are bound into books that she makes herself. And this idea of like it's not just about a ritual, but a commitment. And when I've been doing walkthroughs with different groups of the show, one of the things that comes up is this question of what constitutes a practice. And maybe we can talk about that later if it's relevant. But that was the idea, was just to give access to process and what. So I think this book is from 2022. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
I do actually want to come to that question about what is a practice and how drawing, how you have kind of emblemized, how drawing fits in with that. But just a note before we leave this section here is that I also really appreciated how, I mean, this section in particular, I feel is worth revisiting because not only, there's just such a like multiplicity of how drawing gives you access to multiple senses. So, the Dottie Addie, which is, thinking about, line as in terms of Anglo's practice and how it frames the gaze, how it genders the gaze. And then Dottie Addie's kind of like breaking up that, kind of disturbing that gaze is so beautiful. And then Emily's work, which, as a kind of neurodiverse artist, really brings in this idea of drawing and touch and, touching the animal, touching a pencil, and then thinking about, again, complicating what seeing is, what sight is, and then how drawing allows the viewer to actually open your eyes, to those multiple senses. And then, the kind of like really fantastic Alex Katz, which you said is a study for a print, or, vice versa. So all these different ways in which line gives us access to multiple senses. We can go to the next slide, Chloe. So we're getting now to like the spectacular section of the exhibition, and we're going to enter these next couple of sections, around these bigger themes like abstraction and politics and again, actually women and the role, social change. But Sarah, I thought maybe you could talk here a little bit about, how abstraction and drawing kind of come together, but then also go to that question of like, how did you kind of come to your baseline in a way for drawing and sort of like, really think of it not, again, super expansively, as I quoted you in your essay.
Yeah, so when we were starting to organize this show, which was 2 summers ago, into the fall, into the new year, there were questions internally, how are we defining drawing? And, there's the idea of mark making. We did a kickoff program for our public programs for the show in September with Laura Hauptman from the Drawing Center and Amy Werble, who teaches at FIT. Amy gave great insights into the early works in the collection. And then at some point in that panel, Laura talked about how she had worked at MoMA and then also is now at Drawing Center, and both institutions the definition of drawing is a one-off work on paper. And I think that's a fine definition of drawing. I think for our purposes, in part because we're an institution that is both art and architecturally focused, drawing is part of a process that gets you to an outcome or a kind of result that might not be drawing. Felt like it needed to be really present in this show. I'm not sure on this wall how to characterize that exactly, but I'll point out that 3 of the works on this wall are from the collection. The second from the left is Judy Pfaff's Lumi de Obra, which is a print. And then next to that is Richard Archwager's The Cyclist, and that's a diploma work, as is Judy's. And then there's like a lower work that's kind of a spiral, and that's Robert Mangold. And I think that's like a cornice or facade study is the title, something like that. So those 3 are from the collection. And just if we put them together, something came up that was very obvious, like motion study, or the idea of movement being communicated in drawing, but also the abstract. And at the upper, there's this kind of 5-panel wood panel piece by Andrea Blum, who's not affiliated with the Academy outside of the show yet. But this is an interesting piece because it's her taking architectural programming from architectural drawing application. So like something, if you were to kind of render an interior in an architectural program, like a computer program or design program, these are 5 different wood grains that you would find. And so Andrea's kind of like smiling, like she's like describes it with a smile, saying, it's like I picture somebody drawing this, but they're not drawing it like this, they're drawing it like programming, like plotting pixels. So in a way, that was thinking about drawing as something that's technical, even though the work doesn't look so technical from a certain distance. On the right hand is a work called Points Being Made, which I feel like there's an emoji on Slack that I keep seeing that's like a red thing like that means anger, but I love that. I don't know if there's any real connection there, but it's by Christine Sun Kim, and in each corner there's this kind of point, and handwritten. And I think it's in a way then it's getting to drawing as something that represents gesture, not just movement, but gesture or communication.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I mean, that's really actually so helpful and thoughtful in thinking about drawing as a point in a creative practice, and something that leads you and allows you to really kind of like deeply explore. And so I think that particular wall really shows like where drawing can take you, that it's actually, a kind of pathway to so many other ways of thinking, and so that was really beautiful to see. So maybe this is actually a better slide for thinking about the ways in which abstraction, I guess, enters into the sort of like history of the collection and the practice of different artists in the exhibition. If there's anything you maybe wanted to remark on these works, and I think we're gonna come back to Christine Sun Kim, who I think is super a super interesting artist that you included, and I'm again want to return to this idea of her expansive practice of thinking about drawing, and we'll talk more about where she expands into when we get into back to the work.
Absolutely. So this is sort of half of a wall that is it's all kind of black and white and a little touch of red. And left to right is Zilia Sanchez, Furia 3. The middle work is 4 from a series called Scully by Clifford Owens. And on the right is bamboo. That's bamboo. I think it's bamboo cane drawing, also by Clifford Owens. So though these are dealing with abstraction, they're actually generated through gesture. And that's an important piece of this part of the show, is thinking about the residue of gesture as drawing. So on the left is Sanchez's Furia piece, and it's a kind of a piece that she would kind of work that she would make with her eyes closed, kind of in a gestural movement on paper, which you can see the density of that. With Clifford's, Scully is a piece that's based on a game called Scully that involves flicking a bottle cap, right? And so he did that, but filled the bottle caps with graphite paste. And so the graphite paste, the lines you see are the kind of abstract kind of coverage has to do with the movement of the bottle cap. And you can see that there are bottle caps attached to each of those drawings that are unframed. And then with bamboo cane, it's a similar thing, except Clifford has this like long bamboo cane that he's got graphite on the end of, and I'm kind of gesturing over here. He's kind of standing over the paper, making this kind of circular motion. So abstraction, but also motion, the kind of performative gesture being inscribed on paper.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Chloe, can we just take a peek at the next slide? I think,
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to continue?
Sure. I mean, I can say quickly, the work from the collection on this wall is the upper right-hand corner, and that's Robert Motherwell. And then, and also Charles Gaines's work on the left, which combines a speech from Stokely Carmichael with a libretto. It's from 2016. It's beautiful. I mean, that's where we've got a little color, a little red. So you can see it's this kind of layering of music and political text. And then I think one of the young stars of the show is Adam Liam Rose with these drawings. You can see there, I don't remember the titles, but it's he described making them during the pandemic. The left hand corner one, which is like kind of with these squares on it, is called The Kiss. I know that. And yeah, I think a lot of it speaks to the uncertainty of the pandemic, and that Adam just comes from an architectural background and was making architectural structural objects, and then started moving into these drawings during the pandemic. And I think of them as like the one in the lower left is like a set of sinkholes that we could, now I'm looking at questions, but I'll keep my eyes here.
Well, actually, I think Natalia, your colleague, is giving the title of the work, Stages of Fallout. It's Adam's, I was checking too in the brochure. So, you mentioned actually in the previous work, and it's actually coming up now in like Charles Gaines's work, thinking about music and performance, and other time-based, ways in which drawing actually starts to enter into the story of the exhibition. Can we just check the next slide, I think? Okay, so this is, you can get a view of the gallery itself, and how, elegantly you kind of move from section to section, and, how the works are, even though, as Sarah mentioned, this is sort of a salon style hang, but there's actually quite a bit of intentionality as to like how you encounter the various groupings. Can we look at the next slide? Yeah, okay, so here, again, you're coming around the corner into this really somewhat, I think, like, both sparse, but I think of it as like mind-opening, eye-opening section, and Christine Sun Kim reappears again. So, but maybe I'll have Sarah talk a little bit about artists who she's represented in like both drawing and sculpture, right, but then also maybe sort of like how a drawing show can actually blend drawing and painting and sculpture. And then we're going to probably go into thinking about like drawing, video, and performance, and sort of like which I think again feels so actually logical in the exhibition, but you wouldn't necessarily expect it in a drawing show unless wrapped around this idea of process and practice. So I'll hand it back to Sarah.
Yeah, I think some of that issue of like performativity being related to drawing, for me, what's important is like, not all artwork is intended to have the same kind of impact, but if an artwork is intended to have impact, how do we see it play out in the world? And I think the performative gesture is something that becomes apparent, or can become apparent as something that comes up off the page, as Vito Acconci might have said, right, about his poetry moving into performance, coming off the page. But I also think there's this formal relationship. The 4 works on the left, 2 sculptures and 2 drawings in the background, are by Katie Schimmert, who was one of the first artists outside of the Academy that I thought to talk to about the show, because I knew about her work in ceramics and how that relates to the drawings, and that they're abstract, but they also have a kind of figurative quality that would, like, in my mind, looped back to the Écorché model, and that we looked at the beginning, the anatomical model. And if you were in the gallery and saw the backs of these ceramic objects on the plinth that Katie made, they actually look like the backside, like a human backside, kind of lower back. In the middle is a work by John Newman, who's an academician, and it's untitled. And on the right is the work by a second work by Christine Sun Kim. This one is called it's called Competing Languages, and it refers to SIMCOM, or simultaneous communication, which is what happens when one person is doing ASL and somebody is speaking in in English. And so the idea that in certain kinds of situations, even if there's a translation going on or communication going on, spoken English will often supersedes ASL for a variety of reasons. So that's where SIMCOM comes from. But I guess I thought like competing languages for me, just there are associations I can make with that myself that aren't really, I don't know I don't know if I could tie them to something as concrete as this issue of SIMCOM and what happens between competing languages. Yeah, and I think this room, it's funny you call this sparse because nothing about this show felt sparse to me. But maybe it's just a moment, relatively speaking.
Yeah, well, I think also, like, again, in front of Christine's work, where like the blank page is so,
Yeah.
full and present, and so like, I think I'm just referring like to specific artists who
Okay.
through very minimal gestures, communicate so much. And so I mean, I use the word sparse kind of relatively.
Yeah.
Chloe, can we look at the next slide? Okay, so this is like a close-up of the Katie Schimmer's work. I didn't get the backside of it, but I think again, we're really, I think, encouraging visitors to go back and hopefully, see the show with fresh eyes, with Sarah's insight. So this is a close-up of the Christine Sun Kim competing language. And, I want to point out here with this close-up, and you see that how, like, when Christine uses language, she often uses it in very, very small kind of like scale. And so, forces you to come close to the image. But I also love how, when she's working with like graphic lines, she leaves the smudges in and she leaves her hand, the point of her contact. And you can also see at the ends of these lines, these little circular kind of like dots that she's like finishing and creating almost like this visual tempo or music for you to follow along.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like notation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so in her manner, here's a close-up of the points being made piece. And again, you can see the kind of characteristic small, all caps, handwriting. I mean, Sarah, do you want to talk a little about Christine's drawing practice in particular? Because, both in terms of scale and the way in which the visual actually then also addresses a kind of subjectivity, her own positionality, and how, it actually activates. I
think, what I would say is that a lot of my interest in her work is the way that she's been able to communicate and critique the ableism of society at large, the cultural sector more specifically. There was work I think that was in the 2019 biennial or 2017, where it was like these kind of infographics about how people approach deafness in the art world. But really what intrigued me about the work in the context of the show was thinking about her play with scale. She did a big mural at the Queen's Museum, like on that kind of mural wall. And to me, to think about drawing as something that could be applied as a mural, and we had hoped to do something like that, but the timeline of how fast we organized this once we had access to the new space, it just meant we were working with these kind of standalone works. And I also think her work with video, there's video performance, but also this piece, Time Owes Me Rest Again, is kind of just an impactful statement that's done through animation. So thinking about drawing and animation. So I was thinking a lot about scale, the capacity to critique through language. So use of, like, it's not agitprop necessarily, but language as being tied to drawing, writing tied to drawing, which we see in Michael Waugh's work that we looked at earlier on. And then this idea of like something that could take over a whole space would have been really appealing if we could have done like a wall scale mural, but for another show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I completely agree with you that adding Christine's work to the exhibition you know, again, I think really speaks to both your sense of how, you know, a drawing has the capacity to be both critical and political, but in a quiet way, and really kind of like provokes you to think. And so that's what was really struck me about her inclusion in the exhibition. And again, to me, very fitting in a drawing show, given that her practice is really, you know, black and white, hand-drawn letters. And even as she works in, you know, the animation and video, it still goes back to, you know, something that she starts by hand. I was super interested in this transition with, hopefully the next piece is a slide. Okay, well, we can talk a little bit about, you know, you started to talk about like, we've been talking about language, and we've been talking about, you know, more contemporary artists, but Shelley Rodriguez's work I thought was also really wonderful to bring in, again, you know, a little bit more overtly political and critical of the art world. And so we could talk here, and then we can maybe we'll swing back to video.
So
and the next, this is fine, Chloe. This is good.
Yeah. So these two works by Shelley on the left are kind of what I love about the work, and I think Natalia was in agreement, like they come across as paintings to me. I mean, I can't speak for everyone. If you get closer, you can see that it's colored pencils on black paper, right? And so, but it really, the density, the richness of the imagery is very much like reaches me like a painting. And I also really love the way that Shelley's work, especially with portraiture, captures the sort of local. We just did a talk with her in Melchin earlier this week, and she actually said, like, you know, that she sees her artwork as separate from her political involvement or activism. But I think that there's like an amount of coded or kind of symbolic information in the middle image. The middle work is called Esquire Strikes Empire, and it's based on like a mixed, it's from the mixtape series. It's based on a kind of flyer for a party in the Bronx. And so what I love is how she's using this structure, a kind of like sign structure. You can see there's like an architecture of the image, and then there are figures built into that, and then smaller details that reference a different kind of cultural lineage that comes together in the Bronx. So I think the work is a lot about community and like representing community, but also then there are these sort of symbolic details that reference political movements that are important to those communities. And of course, on the right is Edgar Heap-of-Bird's work. This is what he's calling a vintage remix or a vintage collage of his monoprints. And yeah, Natalia just was saying too, with Shelley's work, it's a reference to hip hop flyers. But going back to Edgar's work, these are works he's been doing for 30 years. So the dates on this collage is 2000 to 2022, I think. And the title is Redskin Bounty. So he's drawing from like language from pop culture. Some of it, when I read these works, I often think about the sort of pejorative ways in which Indigenous culture has been treated, described, articulated. And then what he does that I find so moving is he's able to connect that to more kind of uplifting and spiritual points of reference that connect to Indigenous culture. So here again, I mean, you see it in Shelley's work as well. There's this connection between drawing and writing. So these are prints that Edgar did, but each one is kind of handwritten before it gets transferred.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I do love the way in which the idea of writing, text, voice kind of like is also a through line in the exhibition. So here we are back. We're getting sort of towards the later walls and galleries in the exhibition. I mean, well, we can go back, Chloe, to quickly. I know we're running close to time. Any comments, Sarah, about Melchin's incredible work and really how you've been able to take kind of fairly intimate and actually surprisingly delicate works of his. I mean, he works in large scale installation and pretty like fascinating political critique. But yeah, I mean, to maybe talk quickly about his other
Yeah.
forays into media and
So
into
this
drawing.
is, yeah, this
yeah.
is from a project. It's called Convo Pool, and it comes out of a series of works he did with graduate students in the 90s. A group that collectively made artistic interventions into the set of Melrose Place. So the upper left-hand image in this mood board that Mel put together is an image from Melrose Place. And then this proposal, the sort of design, the mood board convo pool, is a proposal that comes after. It's like he's made a seating area, a lounge that's upholstered in satin that looks like this pool, and different sections of it roll around. So you can kind of move. So it's about social intercourse. And you can see there's female genitalia in the mood board, and that's referenced in the form of the kind of, like, I don't know, the form of what's in the pool. Yeah, so I saw it at Red Bull Studios in probably 2017 or 2018, and was part of a program there, and we sat in the pool together, a group of us. But this is the kind of example of, like, it's not that it's public art, but something that's meant for public engagement in 2 dimensions that would be, you know, built out in 3D and like a sunken pool.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think we have maybe one more section I'd love to look at before we get some concluding thoughts. Okay, so here, again, I was struck by, and I was, you know, so happy to see the Ana Mendieta work
Yep.
in your exhibition. So I think you have to speak to that.
Yes, of course. So yeah, so earlier we saw, this is a connection that Natalia's made. Earlier we saw the image of Richard Archwager's cyclist work, and that's like a silhouette, though it's rubberized hair. And the silhouette, the kind of outline of the figure, is something that connects here, where you have the outline of the figure. It's a silhouette series. And it's, you know, scorched into the earth. So thinking about drawing that could connect to earthworks, performance, it just felt really natural to expand to something like this with Mendieta's work, because it's figurative, it's performative, it's a non-traditional way of drawing, or, you know, it doesn't fit into the sort of earlier modes of drawing that we discussed, you know, instructional or straight figuration, you know, charcoal to paper, that kind of thing. So I think that it was really just, it seemed obvious, and Natalia and I didn't discuss it at length. We're like, yes, let's get this. And that was the choice. And I think when we've done some tours together, Natalia's talked about that connection between, like, the form of Archwager's cyclist with this work is an interesting interplay. Just in terms of an outline, like the outline of a figure as a kind of drawing, but the material that it takes is less critical than the fact that it is this outline. That sounds maybe too basic, but that was the thinking.
No, I actually think it connects really beautifully to the Dottie Addy as well, and then from Dottie Addy back to you know, to Angla, you know, really about how this signifier of, you know, of the female body, but you know, becomes like a kind of more in Mendieta's hand, you know, one of like, you know, like female archetypes and empowerment, and really, and then, you know, really her position as, like, you know, a Cuban American artist, and how, you know, how she's, you know, been moving between different worlds. So I think it really does open up, you know, the way in which you think about, excuse me, the outline of a body, and you know, as you've said, the connection to figurative work, and the figure, from the beginning of the exhibition. 1 second. Sorry, just had to do that little cough on the side. Why don't we go to the next image? Okay, so we're going to start wrapping up, and Sarah, I thought maybe we could speak here maybe about like surprises and sort of like other little, like, necessary stories that you really wanted to tell in the exhibition. I mean, I was, you know, I was struck here by almost like a the work here is both a return to, you know, some of the mid-early 20th century practices and artists, but also your hint of like, the possibility of what drawing can continue to be.
Yeah.
And then we'll end with the one that's, again, not in this section, but one that also I think is almost like an invitation to the viewer as to, about your thesis.
What I can say about these works is 6 of them, except for the upper left-hand corner, are in the collection. I'll just name the works. Lower left-hand corner is Charles Wilbert White, Head of a Boy, which in digital form doesn't come through to the, so if there's one work to come see in the show that is hard to read digitally, that's the one. And next to it is Robert Riggs' The Psychopathic Ward. Above that is Asa Hefetz's, I can't remember I think it's like American something, Natalia might write it in. Next to that is Paul Cadmus, The Fleet's Inn, which is from 1934. And that's a print, and it ends up being a painting, and it's a work that was very political for Cadmus. It was shown in DC. I think it was in a WPA exhibition. And it shows like men from the Navy, naval officers hanging out at Riverside Park with women, ostensibly prostitutes. That was the read of it at the time. And that a naval officer, somebody in the Navy, required that the work be removed from the show. And the real issue was that Cadmus was openly gay, and the work was provocative. It looked like they were having too much fun. Below that is Grace Albee, Butchering at Mr. Fluxhouse, and on the right is Modern Times by Robert Blackburn. And so I think that the social realism piece is something important to show from our collection. Michael Waugh's work in the upper left-hand corner is called Planned Parenthood, and it's one of the texts. It's a bill to proposing to do away with abortion rights, and he's taken that bill. It's a very short bill, and he's drawn this rabbit, which is a reference in part to the rabbit test, or there are other rabbit associations with sex and abortion. yeah, exactly. So this was I think a great opportunity to showcase some of these works, which most of which haven't been shown in a very long time, if at all, and from the collection. And then to connect that with work which is across the room from Edgar Hippoberts, Shalene Rodriguez, L.J. Roberts, this kind of more contemporary, like thinking about social commentary as opposed to social realism, which they're connected, of course, but it's really just like the precursor. These precede what we know now as social commentary or agitprop artwork.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. I think we have a close-up of the Blackburn, which maybe we won't spend so much time on. I know we're running close to, believe it or not, a little bit after 2 o'clock. But I certainly encourage, so this is, the entire view of that beautiful wall. And I thought we could just pull up maybe the last slide, I think. This is, again, Sol LeWitt is, major figure in conceptual art and minimalism, and, inclusion of this like beautiful proposal for work, but also a, incredible drawing of itself. Perhaps Sarah will say something, but we can, I think, also use this as like a sounding board to open it up to questions from the audience, because we've gone through so many different ideas and beautiful works. But Sarah, any thoughts on this as like a,
so
final thoughts? Yeah.
We reached out to a couple of lenders about the possibility of getting like a Sol LeWitt wall drawing, thinking about the idea of instructional art drawing as like in the contemporary sense, which we have instructional academic drawings from the 19th century at the beginning of the show when you first walk in. And though this is not at the end of the show, it kind of is a connection to be made, or maybe a place to kind of move away from that kind of formal representation or literal representation of the figure, and then to think about like diagramming and mapping and the way in which an instructional drawing can then become a conceptual work, something that can be carried out by somebody else. So anyway, I think that was the decision. But when we spoke to people at Paula Cooper Gallery, we were just explaining the premise of the show, about to say we'd love to get a Sol LeWitt work if you can help us. I know it's short notice, it's the kind of assuming it wouldn't work out. And they said, oh, of course, like, yeah, we have instructional drawings by him. And I thought, oh, we were talking about a different kind of instruction. So that connection was fun to realize in the midst of organizing the show. but I think it speaks to so many different, this small drawing speaks to so many different directions that the exhibition takes, from gesture to performance to plans and proposals. So yeah, maybe LeWitt is, you know, is more central than I would have realized. But I'd be up for some questions if there are any.
Yeah, I think, Chloe, is this a good time to maybe open up the audience?
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina and Sarah, for that incredibly generous conversation about the exhibition. Please, if anyone has a question for Sarah, please feel free to ask it in the chat or raise your hand, but I'm going to go first because, well, and if you have a question, feel free to go after me. Sarah, you open your essay about the exhibition. There's so many really thoughtful points in there, but especially about the overlaps of art and architecture and about drawing sort of sitting at that convergence. But you also talk about the way drawing often exists at the margins of a practice. And I was curious to hear you speak about that and about it struck me relevant to going through a collection and a history and pulling things out and bringing them into public view at such a specific time in the Academy's history. And then also to create a new contemporary conversation with additional works and perspectives in the mix as well. So I was just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, thinking about drawings in the margin, I think of, you know, notation you might see in a book in the like the marginalia. Like I think there's something to the role of drawing, and I do in my own thinking really connect that to drawing and writing, the handwritten word or language that's written. I think these connections are important, and I guess I don't. What I would say is that it's just, one can't underestimate the value of process. And there was a point when we were talking about titles for the show, and I thought it could be drawing as process, but practice felt more assertive in terms of connecting art and architecture together. But the process piece for me feels like really critical to value the role of drawing, the process of drawing, in making all kinds of work and in all kinds of plans and all kinds of thought processes. Like I think that the thought process is something that gets captured. And so I think it's just often underestimated. It's like the notes that one makes to make an artwork or to make a building or to make a design. Those marks are not nothing, you know, they're important, they're integral. And so maybe it's just an argument for recognizing those underpinnings, and maybe in a way there's a metaphor there about the Academy, you know, looking back at our beginnings and understanding this, what is foundational to the Academy's origins. And then kind of, you know, as we go forward, we might do shows that could be critical of some of our history, but to always appreciate where the works were, you know, were made, you know, with true intentions. Like I think it's something about going back to our beginnings, even if some of those beginnings, you know, seem less clear in this moment or less relevant. It's like it all has a way. It all contributes to understanding the sort of process of getting to where we are now. Kind of a sweeping answer.
You can feel that in the exhibition and in the various ideas that it explores. Thanks for answering my question. I believe Fong Bui, our publisher and artistic director, has a question to close out the Q&A. So I'll turn it over to Fong.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Sorry, I was in the meeting in and out, so I didn't entirely heard the whole entire NSE, but I heard enough that to ask one quick question, because you know, drawing is an amazing thing, as we know. It's like a muscle and the bones of art in a way. I remember Ang. It's a story of Ang and Delacroix. It's so interesting because Ang represent the perfectibility of neoclassicism. He was almost like a court painter, so to speak, because he was a student of David, remember? And he said drawing is a property of art, that precision of line, the purity of line. And there was a dispute between him and Delacroix. According to Delacroix, journal, and it's sort of known in the fact that Delacroix was completely being looked down by the master Ang, an older generation. You know, Delacroix, I think he said that, Monsieur, you can't really draw to save your life. And Delacroix in response say, it's true, but I bet you I can draw the whole entirety of a man falling off the second story. By the time he hit the sidewalk, I'm complete the whole entirety of the drawing, where you still rendering the ear. You know, it's so interesting to put in that context romanticism, trying to overturn neoclassicism. And that's exactly what happened. The French Revolution was right in the middle of it. But it's so interesting to think of drawing as a practice that only artists value for so long as time. And I know the great collector, Eugene Paul, one of the great American collector of works on paper, who gave half of it to the Morgan Library. And you've seen it all. It's amazing, remarkable drawing and works on paper. It's super cheap. For the longest time, you can buy anything. You know, you can buy with the Goya drawing to Ang to all the way leading to even artists in the 70s, even Solowit you mentioned, you know, for nearly nothing. But it's so interesting to me that I remember when I came to New York, being exposed and interested in outsider artists. I don't want to use that word, but that was what being called at the time. Now maybe people say it's secular, vernacular, or self-taught artists, or where have you not? I mean, there's so many labels, but because of we've been curating tons of different permutation of this series we call Singing in Unison, where we put up works of taught artists alongside with self-taught artists.
Right.
And taken away the label, so to speak. So we can put up Lonnie Holly or Thornton Dial next to Sean Scully or, you know, Chris Martin, other people. But I remember it was decisively, maybe in the mid-90s, where self-taught artists, take example, Bill Trailer. I remember going to Hirsch Adler Modern on Madison, just across from the Frick, really, on Madison Avenue. And I saw the Bill Taylor show. You know, it was amazing. You guys, some of you remember the great, I don't think he got making art late in his life, but he was born into slavery. He created this pictographic, like lexicon of images, telling story about people of that very condition in Alabama, animal, plant people to get together. And you can buy it for $800, maybe even less some cases. And only to that end of the 90s, same thing happened with James Castle, another so-called self-taught artist born in Boise, Idaho. And all of a sudden, this question is very simple, you guys. Don't let me prolong this more need to rather than being short and concise. But I have the feeling it was a self-taught artist or outsider artist or vernacular artist whose work some point was not anything else but works on paper. When you think about Bill Trailer or James Castle, I'm just naming a few, there's many other people. And people became super interested in collecting it in the turn of 2000, you know? And I don't know whether I'm right on this. I haven't spoken to a few other friends, but maybe you would know, Sarah, or Christina, and some people in our audience. But I have the feeling it's the collecting of those self-taught artists that elevate somehow the respectability, the legitimacy of works on paper. And all of a sudden it helped to elevate the value, you know? So what are your view on this, Sarah and Christina?
So what you're saying, Fong, is that the value of drawing has been elevated by contributions from self-taught or
Yeah,
artists.
that's my question.
I think, I don't know if I agree, but what I think is fully agree, I'd have to think about it further. But what I do find interesting is the accessibility of drawing is something that in certain moments could sort of shift it to becoming more valuable. I think in the conversations we had with artists and architects, but it was mainly with artists in studio visits, for example, one thing that came up a lot was, oh, these are drawings I made during COVID, during the lockdown, at a moment where, you know, resources, it's not that they were necessarily hard to come by, but, you know, a studio wasn't necessarily in its full form at that point because of lockdown or restrictions, right? So I think there's a value that starts to emerge around that, about conditions, you know what I mean? Conditions, constraints that can make a work more appealing. And the idea of like, is it about, you know, a gilded trophy frame, like one of Mel Chin's works, the gilding and the kind of elaboration of the artwork, or is it really like the distilled concept or intention of the artist in the making of that drawing?
Yeah.
I think you can get to a place where that's valued first. I mean, from my perspective, that's really wonderful. It's not to say it shouldn't be well made. It's just, does it do the materials? It's like, are the trappings of the artwork, it's materials and production value. Is that what we're talking about? Or are we talking about what impact the work has? And I feel like impact and conditions to me are kind of engaging and give something value. I think you're talking about the market, and I'm not so, I don't know if I have so much to say about that, but maybe Christina has thoughts.
Yeah. I actually don't think I can say much about the market, but Fong, I really appreciate actually your comment that that drawing as a genre, as a media, as a practice, actually has been so inclusive to actually bring in, and also just, I mean, like to Sarah's point about it being accessible. I mean, I think of like, you know, like again, to use your terminology, you know, self-taught artists or anyone who picks up a mark making tool drawing on bark cloth. So, you know, I think both Sarah's capaciousness of thinking about drawing as a practice and as process, and then combined with your comment that, you know, now the history of art can actually include, you know, a much wider sense of materiality and a sense of who is an artist. And so I love thinking of, you know, the possibility of different kinds of mark making and different kinds of material, especially by like artists who did not go to the National Academy of Design, as being, you know, part of this, you know, concept of a practice of drawing. So that's a really beautiful way to think about another chapter, you know, that could be possible within this exhibition.
And can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think an example in the show that we didn't really elaborate on is LJ Roberts' portraits from a series called I Carry You With Me. They're these very small embroidered portraits of members of their kind of chosen family, LGBTQ activist family, Ted Kerr, Sarani Sir, and others. Those works take like 6 months to make. And what was interesting, when LJ and Clifford Owens were in conversation earlier in the season, LJ was saying how grateful they were, how happy they were to see their work in a drawing show, because their background was more craft, right? Or they're perceived often to be a craft-based artists. And I, you know, I never even really contemplated that, getting to know their work years ago. Like, it just, to me, was like, I understood the impact of the work, and but I think that work has a specific value, maybe along the lines of what you're talking about, Fong.
Yeah, it's also very interesting when Anne Harnoncourt, being the director of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, helped to mount it, the first ever retrospective of James Castle. I drove down to see it. It must have been 2000, I think might have been 2008 or 9. And it's fantastic. It just shows you how the brevity and the seriousness of how he treated the materiality of his drawing techniques, you know. It's mostly carving into various paper surfaces, depending on how the tooth would take the spit and the way that he used branches and all kind of unconventional tool to make that amazing pseudo line of black, you know, black color as a color. I know that my friend Terry Winter is obsessed with him. I think he has at least 40 or 50 of them when you can get them in those days. But going further back, Anne Harnoncourt's father is René Harnoncourt, the first president of MoMA, when MoMA was created in the early 30s, you know? And he used to be a dealer of folk art in Mexico. And you go back and look at the diagram that Alfred Bohr put out, the torpedo diagram. Self-taught art was being called primitive art, not a correct term that we can use today, but they were up there with Cubism, with Surrealism. And in fact, when Alfred Bohr curated the show of a self-taught artist, Polish-American-born artist whose name escaped me in a moment, but it will come to me in a minute, Morris Hirschfeld, who had a show a year ago at the Folk Art Museum. He was fired for having done it. He lost his job because of that show. So it's interesting, it took this so long now that everything that had been considered lesser in terms of value, artistic value, as well as monetary value, is coming back and being appreciated much more now than ever. So I have to think about it too, you know. I don't know how true it is, but I know it's part of the dialogue for back and forth for a while. But thank you so much, Sarah. I can't wait to see the show. Thank you, Christina. Congratulations also. Thanks for coming on. Back to you, Chloe. Thank you.
Thank you, Phong, and thank you again, Sarah and Christina. That concludes our Q&A today, and just want to say thank you one more time to you both for your conversation and for all of your generous dialogue around this exhibition. At the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with a poetry reading, and I'm thrilled to welcome our Poet Laureate of the day, Sallie Fullerton, to the stage. Sallie Fullerton is a poet and writer living in Brooklyn, a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop. Their work has appeared in Bennington Review, Prairie Schooner, Literary Hub, Frontier Poetry, and Pathetic Literature, edited by Eileen Miles. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sallie.
Thanks, Chloe. Thank you, Sarah and Christina. And thank you, Brooklyn Rail. I'm really, really excited to be here and honored. So I'm just going to read a few poems from a larger series. Keep it quick. This one's just called Poem. It is, in fact, impossible to do nothing with your life. At the edge of the season, our days hardly resemble one another's, but we speak in similar turns around an impossible circle. Inhibition becoming one uninterrupted movement that looks so simple it's stupid. This is perfection, a lesson about futility and resolve and how they bark at each other productively, like two legs walking in opposite directions, only to produce gymnastics. You, the pillar of body in the middle. Now we want it all natural and irregular, but this is not what kept you alive long enough to see the world change. Even without you, it changes, somehow faster now. The strangest thing, he said, was not knowing how the paint job would turn out. People ask you things like, what color do you prefer? You answer knowing you will never enter the room. You answer from your own room, which has no color, which is slowly and indelicately being torn from the house. In the end, we sold the furniture, the walls, and everything in it. We sold the house. Now neither of us can wonder about how to use that odd room, the readiness of outdoor plumbing. We bought time to think of other things. Euphoria field goal. If I could, I would grant you your self-evidence. Let it be known that there is nothing left to look for. Let the scolding stop and steam off in the bucket. The world has been big this whole time, even as we push its corners beyond themselves. Even through last night's horror and the day before, it remains big. You were born here and did not leave. Here you could wave like a flag on a high building. You could have the same brush with infinity once a month, and you could go to work. Each morning something woke you. You awoke. Once a performance hinted at perfection. You got on stage and drank beer among the actors. Happiness collapsed into wood and bottles. Each day, light seeped anywhere it could. It touched you, your face. It held you. And just two more. The Great American Breakfast. I watch others play out the same event, the unmistakable mark of pain, the flagrancy of the sun and the way the wind convulsed, tried to say something. As I remember it, it is already changing, a hemorrhaging of truth, an egg cracked in oil. We flock around an idea of coolness, which means nothing, understands nothing. The requirement of life being to pick up something grotesque off the floor and lick it, stomach a little gore, scratch off the prefix, then the suffix, then read the word naked. As the day goes on, I become more fashionable by accident. The breakfast looked better than it tasted. It has been a week, I say. It has been a week. I think of all the science you will never understand. There was a moment when it nearly made sense, when we sat on the floor and I wiped blood from your lips as the weather changed imperceptibly. You spat out your toast. You no longer needed food. Meanwhile, I've been chasing the Great American Breakfast, which mostly means the right place at the right time and has not existed in years. The way we begrudgingly took the walk, I wear your shirt, and suddenly everything you knew flashed across the sky. And I'll end with one called Smoke Scroll. Was it me who went into the room, or did the fact take me there? I know I sat on the bed, you on the floor. Advice hangs in the air, becoming a smoke scroll, something you know will unfurl years down the line, by then malignant. Despite myself, I do not take the life-saving precautions. I am choosing between two equally expensive cars. Your penultimate bed, I am still on the floor. I am in the next room fetching towels. For tonight, I had never thought of a bed as something other than time itself centered in a room. Each morning, thousands of facts are christened as results. The amount of impossible things we see in a day collapsed the morning you lost your ability to read, which you did, matter-of-factly. Facts enter the room like buildings. We believe things we know are false. Eventually, absolutely everything becomes horizontal, is a horizon. On my final bed, I may also want scotch and a cigarette. I'm writing it down now. Life is beautiful. It lasts a long time. Thank you, everybody.
Wow. Sallie, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that Ty and I ran into you on the train a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for reading today, and for closing this amazing program and conversation. Thank you again to Sarah. Thank you to Christina. Thank you to the team at National Academy of Design, as well as especially Yasmin, and as well as Liza Stoner, who were really supportive in pulling together materials ahead of this event. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making daily conversations like this one possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. We encourage you to help keep the Rail free. We're fundraising $200,000 this season to directly support our writers, guest artists, production staff, and operations for the coming year. As a small nonprofit, we do need your support. You can donate at the link in the chat to help us meet our goal. And if you're free on Monday at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation with our writers, Eleanor Hartney, Will Corwin, Saul Ostro, and Amanda Millett-Sorsa, which will be hosted by our managing editor, Charlie Schultz, on the occasion of the group exhibition Retinal Hysteria at Venus over Manhattan. We'll conclude with a poetry reading. And as is Rail tradition, you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Christina.
Sarah.
Sallie.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Christina.
Great reading,
Sarah and Christina.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Sallie.
Sarah. Thank you
Much.
so much. Beautiful reading. Thank you so much there. Thank you.
Thank you to the audience.
Thank
Amazing to Feel you, see
Yeah.
you there, hear you
Thank
all.
you, Christina. Thank
Have
you.
a great weekend,
Sarah.
everyone.
Take care,
And
everybody.
Bye.
congratulations. Go see the show, you guys. Please. Go see
Bye.
the show.
One
I'm
more
going
week.
tomorrow.